the last few months, I've been covering Incognito Market in detail. Specifically, we've talked about events like Incognito Market's exit scam, which I covered in a video I published on March 6th. This video discussed how the market had robbed all its buyers by exit scamming. Extortion of Darknet vendors. 5 days after the exit scam video, I released another video titled Incognito Darknet Admin Extorts Darknet Vendors with Nothing. Many cave. While it's a mouthful, this video highlighted the Darknet Market admin Pharaoh. And it showed that he had been trying to scare Darknet Market vendors into paying an additional fee even after the exit scam in which he robbed all of them. So he robbed them, then he extorted them. On April 1st, seeing Pharaoh's success in extorting vendors and his announcement of plans to start extorting Darknet buyers, I felt the need to warn the community. I wanted to help people avoid getting robbed by this Darknet Market admin who was trying to extort them. Even if he disclosed their personal information like their addresses, it was still kind of useless info to have, and that was the point I wanted to make. So I published that video, which was called Don't Pay the Ransom, Incognito, April Buyer Extortion Imminent. Again, definitely a mouthful to actually say, but that is the title I wanted. I like descriptive titles for my YouTube videos. Observations and impact. The impact of these events was pretty interesting to watch from a disconnected standpoint. Pharaoh's attempt to extort people was pretty unique in terms of twists in Darknet Market history, because before this, we never heard or seen a Darknet Market admin extort vendors in this, specific manner or context. Community reaction and lessons learned. Pharaoh's actions definitely aggravated everyone and caused an incredible amount of anger within the community. However, it also hardened the community against future attacks kind of like this. So I think it was a kind of a good thing that it happened. I wanted to prevent buyers from getting extorted, and overall, I think very few people would have ended up paying it, because at the time, there was a good amount of information that was actually out there about what the actual repercussions of, say, a Darknet Market admin dropping a buyer's address really was. And there is none. Now that we finally come to the end of this ride, the most recent development is that the same scumbag who was trying to extort people after robbing them initially has caught some justice. The principal administrator of Incognito, or main admin, or however you want to identify him, has finally gotten caught. His real name is this. If you watch this channel regularly, then you know I tend to butcher names and pronunciations, so I'm not even gonna try. I'm just gonna put it up there, and you can read it. And I'll just refer to him as Farrow, because that's easy. Through some open source intelligence gathering, right after the Department of Justice had actually put out the announcement about his court date on Monday, I started to dig into who he was and what social media websites he was on, what information was actually out there about him. And that's the kind of interesting stuff that I wanted to know, like who was this guy and what was he about? Current status. So, for the record, he's currently in federal prison at Brooklyn MDC, which is definitely a pretty shady place to be, and have fun with that, dude. So, I was able to find Farrow on a ton of different sites, and no doubt I could have found more, but I was kind of pressed for time and trying to get this video out to you quickly. I found him on Public Node. So here we see his nodes profile. These are all his public nodes for XMR. And come down, we also see 4 different Tor relays. apparently out of Europe. Then we're going to load up the status. That's it. We can see all his stuff's operational, which good for him, you know. And hopefully it stays like that for the next 300 years. And Twitter. Interestingly, his last tweet was about analyzing crypto traffic size between darknet markets and fund sources. Looking through his tweets, the banner on his Twitter account showed a guy in a cape with an M, which stands for Monero. I guess he probably should have stick to that instead of using Bitcoin to begin with. But at the end of the day, it was definitely interesting to see what kind of stuff he liked, what he tweeted about. It was kind of generic from what I saw. And probably... So some of his other social media accounts that I also saw, in addition to Twitter, were things like Medium. So here we can see that, you know, this is his Medium. We can see the URL, username. He's got 11 followers, apparently, which is interesting. I'm sure if he uses, you know, told everyone that he was the admin of Incognito, he'd have more. You know, blockchain and back-end dev, you know, totally makes sense. But you see, I mean, overall, I think the articles he does all seem to have, you know, the same format in the wording, and they all seem to use AI pictures, mostly. He also had an OpenSea's account. So here we have his OpenSea account. As you can see, OpenSea. And seems like he, you know, has a good amount of, well, I don't know, there's like 37 NFTs here. Which mostly stupid, but I'm sure these will be worth, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in 20 years, and they totally won't be worthless pieces of art, because NFTs, by default for me, they just don't make sense. Portfolio. So here we see his portfolio account. Really, some amazing art here. I just don't get the appeal of any of this stuff. Maybe it's just different mediums, you know, like I work in video, and these are appealing, I guess, for pictures. I don't see it. It looks retarded. And GitHub. The GitHub account was kind of funny, considering that individuals on the Darknet usually dislike JavaScript. It's kind of an anathema to them. Yet the most used language in his GitHub repository was JavaScript. His GitHub profiles stated that he worked for Zenpeak Capital in Taiwan. There's an actual location for a city. Again, put that up here. Read it. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. He had a personal blog as well, and he had a ton of paid accounts when I looked up his stuff. He also, his personal blog, which was more of like a Linktree kind of deal than a detailed blog, provided a good amount of links to other places, which kind of, on a side note, what's really unfortunate for him is that he paid for many of his social media memberships. Like, for example, he is a pro member on GitHub, and he's also paying to be a member on Twitter. And he is a premium LinkedIn, which is, you know, definitely not cheap. Most interestingly, he had a LinkedIn page. He pays for a premium membership on LinkedIn, like I said, and lists himself as a crypto enthusiast and a developer in his About section. At the time, he had about 220 connections and 239 followers. Interestingly enough, he was listed as a diplomatic specialist in information technology and was actively working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Taiwan. So a big time thank you to Nico here, who totally put me on to the fact that the admin was actually a local guide on Google Maps, which lays out a ton of info for us to find about where he went, what he did. I mean, there's video that he took. We got pictures. We got plot points to see where he went, what he did. So massive, massive thanks to Nico, who literally gave me a screenshot that allowed me to go and dig up what you're about to see. So thanks, Nico. You're awesome. So if we look, we can see his name here. And we'll copy that just to confirm later on that this is actually him. And we'll go to my LinkedIn. I ended up sharing this, which was part of his LinkedIn, where he was apparently excited to share that he was doing cybercrime and cryptocurrency training at St. Luca Police Academy. So we'll grab that information and we'll look up St. Luca or Lucia, however you pronounce it. So we look it up, plug it in, and what comes back is a map of a Caribbean island. And we can see at the top, it looks like it's kind of cordoned off by this road. So it's a fairly small area that we have to search. And what I had done was look through some of these earlier, and we're going to use this one. And we see, if we look at it, it's like a restaurant here. Nothing fancy, right? But let's try something else out. All right, let's not do that. So let's try going to the reviews. And let's see what we have here for reviews. What's this? Ooh, that looks familiar. And this is Pharaoh. This is Farrow. Apparently, a list of every place he's been. We can see it's 4 months ago. These reviews, he's a level 6 local guide. We can see in his stats that he's done 16 reviews, 1 rating, 45 photos, 5 videos. You get it. Over 1,000 answers. So we can actually see everywhere he's been plotted out. Now, if we come back, we'll see his individual reviews. And all these look like they kind of took place 4 months ago, basically. He's all excited about his milkshake. Dude won't have no milkshakes where he's going now. For sure. Hope he enjoyed that one. Won't really have too much of a gym either. They don't really have weights and feds anymore, despite what people tell you. Very few facilities do. Definitely not going to be eating like this in federal prison either. This is going to be definitely a delicacy. I hope he enjoyed. Because if he ends up getting those life bids, man, he's not going to see any of that ever again. No boy's worth it, dude. But it's really, it's really unfortunate. But we can actually find him, as a local guide, see every place he's been. If I had time, what I would do is I would snatch all of these photos and I would end up going through them for EXIF data. And we could pull even more info, about his phone and, all that other, great stuff that you're going to pull from it. So, I mean, we could, we're going through this. If he wasn't in, just in St. Luca, we could, we would see where he's been. We would see where he likes to go, like all those kind of, those kind of little things, what he likes to eat, all those kind of little tidbits that are going to tell us about him or his habits. And we can see here the overall plot of where he spent his time, on this island. Additionally, he was listed as a student researcher, in-network security, and a back-end and blockchain R&D intern. His work history dates back to 2019. He had a pretty decent resume from what I saw for someone as young as him, with pretty notable accomplishments, one of which was definitely his side job running Incognito Market, which wasn't listed there. I'm just getting sidetracked. His skill set and background was pretty eclectic as well, mainly focusing obviously on tech stuff. His skills seemed almost custom tailored for running a darknet market, which will bite him in the ass, which we'll get into later, but listing things like, cryptocurrency, digital forensics, and information security as his most notable skills. From my understanding, his English wasn't that great, but he did list English as a full professional proficiency, talk about a tongue twister, on his LinkedIn. Some of his certifications included things like Chain Analysis Reactor Certification, or CRC, and then he had, I think, a Google cert too, along with that in cybersecurity. But he was a student at National Taiwan University, and he studied both information security management and mathematics. And he ended up receiving his bachelor's degree in 2020 for the mathematics part, I think. Hidden in plain sight. So no one is here to talk about how great his resume was, right? I mean, we're here for the juicy stuff. We're here because of that side job that he had. One of the pretty crazy things I saw on his LinkedIn was a post where he showcased himself actually training law enforcement about the darknet, cybersecurity, and cryptocurrencies. I reposted this, comparing it to Gus Fring from Breaking Bad. If you're watching this right now, I'd love to hear your specific take on that. Do you see this parallel that I saw? I've had a few people tell me that there's no correlation, but I definitely disagree on that. I definitely see a correlation between him and Gus, and Gus is way more of a gangster than that kid will ever be. But do you get my point? Like, does that make sense, or am I crazy? Definitely let me know in the comments below. Incognito Market's timeline and impact. Pharaoh's criminal enterprise, Incognito Market, was created in October of 2020 and ended up exit scamming around March of 2024. It was estimated to have facilitated about 100 million in illegal drug transactions, that's quite a number. So to conceal the money he made, Farrow engaged in various forms of money laundering involving many financial institutions. However, some specific platforms that we were able to deduct out of the paperwork that's been put out was Binance and Kraken. Controlled buys and evidence. Law enforcement confirmed that actual drugs were being sold on Incognito Market by making controlled buys multiple times. The documentation shows that when search warrants were actually executed on their servers, there were comprehensive records of all transactions and cryptocurrency exchanges that he had partook in. This evidence is definitely going to come back to bite Farrow later on in a big way. The feds will use every bit of that to just absolutely destroy him. Counterfeit medications. There's also an allegation in the paperwork that, there was some misbranded and counterfeit medications that were being sold on the site. And in December of 2023, law enforcement purchased counterfeit tablets from Incognito Market that actually bore the mark of an actual licensed pharmaceutical manufacturer, but were not actually produced by them. This has some significance because for the feds anyways, they can use it to highlight the depth of Farrow's illegal activities and his just blatant disregard for any of the consumers that were on his site. So what kind of sentence is Farrow actually looking at? Let's break down some of his actual charges that he's facing and kind of dissect them to get an idea of what he might be looking at. The first is called continuing criminal enterprise. as from 21 USC subsection 848A and then B and C. This charge involves leading a criminal enterprise with multiple narcotics violations. And for this, he's looking at a minimum of 20 years to life imprisonment. In my opinion, this is the charge that's really just going to cook him. I've known quite a few people in feds who have had this charge and ended up with life sentences. Actually, a good friend of mine had this charge as his first life sentence, and all the bodies he caught after that were listed only after that. Now, distribution of controlled substances, which is 21 USC, subsection 841A1. For this charge, he could be looking at a potential sentence of 10 years to life. But there are many factors to consider that we simply really can't cover in a YouTube video alone. The United States Sentencing Guidelines is like a tome that you could beat someone to death with. So, there's that. Narcotics importation. 21 USC, subsection 952A, 959A, 960A1, 960A3, 960B3. All right, yeah, you get the point. These violations are numerous and could result in substantial prison time, with sentences ranging from 10 years to life. So we'll have to see for that one. Money laundering, 18 USC, subsection 1956A1B, I. This charge could result in up to 20 years in federal prison, along with very hefty fines. The federal government really dislikes it when you hide money for them or make it illegally and don't give them their cut of it. Either one. Selling adulterated and misbranded medication. 21 USC subsection 331-333A2. This is probably one of the least severe charges that he faces, with a potential sentence of up to 5 years in prison and substantial fines. Upward departures. So, the one thing we haven't actually taken into account yet are, from all the charges we've looked at, is the potential for upward departures, which could increase his sentence a lot. Understanding federal sentencing guidelines is fairly difficult. I'm not going to make this super complex or complicated, but I really do want to address it because it's super important for you to understand, in my opinion. Inside of the federal system, there's a thing called federal sentencing guidelines. And these are exactly what you think they are. They're guidelines giving people prison sentences, right? I mean, it's not complex. We haven't gotten into the craziness yet. Upward departures are also listed here, and they're applied in court because they're seen as factors that basically made the crime worse than just the crime itself. Offense levels in sentencing. Your offense level ranges from 1 to 43. Remember that. 1 to 43. And this directly influences the length of your prison sentence that you actually get. Higher levels result in longer sentences. So, for example, really easy example. If an offender's base level, right, is 30, this means that they could be given a sentence between 97 to 121 months. This is a guideline, so it's not absolutely mandatory that the judge actually gives you a sentence, in some cases. However, there are cases where you do have mandatory sentences, mandatory minimums, etc. So, how do we put this into practice? Can we come up with an example of this? So, an upward departure of, say, 4 levels due to aggravating roles could increase a sentence from 97 to 120 months all the way up to 151 to 188 months. This upward departure can absolutely crush you when being sentenced. So let's look at some of the actual potential aggravating factors or upward departures, whatever you want to call them, that Farrow very likely will face when sentenced. The first one, aggravating role enhancement. The first one is aggravating role enhancement. This applies when someone is an organizer, leader, manager, or supervisor inside of a criminal conspiracy. The consequences for this are an increase in the offense level by 2 to 4 levels, depending on the degree of leadership and the number of participants involved. An increase of 4 points could easily increase the sentence length by 55%. So this is a pretty crushing blow right out the rip. Like, we're on the first one, and this dude's sentence probably just took off by 55%. So it's no joke. So basically, for those 4 extra points, you're looking at a sentence length increase of around 55%, going from 97 to 121 months up to 151 to 188 months. Remember, that was just with the increase of 4 levels. Now that you understand how serious it is to have these upward departures, let's look at his potential upward departures and figure out what they're going to be. How many levels are there and how they're applicable to him? Some of these upward departures were hinted in the documentation that I've already seen, while other ones are just ones that I think you might get. By understanding these factors, we can get a clearer picture of the kind of sentence Pharaoh might be facing. We can also get an idea of what it's actually like to be sentenced using these things, because it's pretty brutal. They can take a pretty innocuous crime and hit you really hard with upward departures and totally change everything. Use of a special skill. No, that's a real one. The second potential upward departure is the use of a special skill. This applies if he used a special skill like technical expertise in cybersecurity or the blockchain to facilitate the crime, which he absolutely did. I mean, the dude's an expert in those things, self-admitted on LinkedIn. So have fun with that, bud. When they applied this, it's going to increase the offense level by 2 levels. This recognizes the enhanced capability of the particular individual, in this case Pharaoh, to commit the crime due to their special knowledge leading to a longer or harsher sentence. It's like a black belt being charged with assault and battery with a deadly weapon for slapping someone, as opposed to the average person, it being just simple assault. Use of a computer or interactive computer service. The third likely upward departure, in my opinion, is the use of a computer or interactive computer service. And it's a mouthful, but this enhancement is applied when someone uses a computer or interactive computer service to commit or facilitate a crime. I know you totally couldn't guess that from my description and the title of it, but I figured I would explain. Like the others, this one would raise the offense level by 2 levels. This takes into account the widespread impact and difficulty in tracking cybercrimes and Pharaoh's use of cybercrimes, which would result in a harsher penalty. So basically, because it's harder for the feds to track them, they're going to hit you with a stiffer sentence for you doing it. But I thought that they always said that cyber criminals couldn't hide using Tor or I2P. I thought it was impossible. You mean to tell me they have a upward departure specifically citing that it's harder for them to track? No way. This fourth one I know about because I had it. And it's mass marketing. The fourth upward departure is mass marketing. This is applied when someone uses mass marketing to sell narcotics or other controlled substances. The consequence is yet another 2-level increase, which reflects the broader impact and potential for widespread distribution associated with mass marketing. They might give them this one, they might not. I'm not 100% sold on this. Obstruction of justice. This one can be a upward departure or it can be a totally separate charge. Obstruction of justice, being our 5th upward departure, is a kind of a weird one. It's kind of a double-edged sword, and it can be an enhancement. Like I said, it applies if a defendant like Farrow obstructed or attempted to obstruct or block or hinder a prosecution or a sentence or an investigation. This too results in a 2-level increase. I could totally see the Fed saying Farrow's actions in closing Incognito Market and threatening to disclose user transaction history unless paid an additional fee could definitely be seen as a obstruction of justice, as he tried to destroy evidence and, basically intimidate participants for financial gain. So enjoy getting that, bit in the ass by your own greed, pal. High volumes of controlled substances. There's an additional upward departure for high volumes of controlled substances. This is used when significant quantities of controlled substances are involved in a crime. And unlike the others, this doesn't have a standard level increase. So if you're the one facing it, it kind of makes it scarier for that reason. But basically, it increases the offender's level based on the drug quantity table in the sentencing guidelines. And I won't dive into the specifics of the drug quantity table here. It's a serious factor that is definitely going to screw him over in the long run. Total upward departure impact. So far, based off what we've seen, we're looking at 10 to 12 points, which is very vague and generalized as far as upward departure increases for Farrow go. But that's just upward departures. And so that's not including his criminal charges, which, the upward departure is going to be compounded on top of. Now, shifting gears to the actual impact on the Darknet, it's basically non-existent. Nobody actually cares. People have already moved on to other markets. Every single one of these, Department of Justice announcements is the same. And it's some United States attorney, squealing about how, criminals cannot hide from the law on the Darknet. But if we look at the actual statistics, the use of encryption and overlay networks, which are Tor, I2P, absolutely allows criminals to hide from law enforcement, which is completely counterintuitive to what these attorneys claim in their press releases. And not only that, they have upward departures specifically because it's harder. So it's just, they're talking out of both sides of their mouths. I can't stand DOJ press releases for this reason. Darknet market resilience. So the fact remains that darknet markets are much like hydras. When you cut one head off, 2 or 3 grow back, typically to replace them. This isn't going to change by busting one darknet market admin. And for the record, I can absolutely see Farrow getting life in prison, as he has a ridiculous amount of stuff stacked against him. I think he's going to have a very tough time, since basically there's not a person on this planet who actually likes the kid, from what I know of. I mean, maybe his mom, but typically I hate seeing people in the position that he's in, especially anyone from the darknet ecosystem and the drug markets get arrested or busted. But this guy, he's definitely the exception to the rule. Everyone I know had a smile on their face when they saw and heard about him getting busted, just because he is such a bastard, Farrow's greed and consequences. Farrow's stealing from customers and then extorting vendors, all of whom had enabled him to have this business that, was $100 million worth of transactions business, was, at best greedy. And in my opinion, this is definitely the most disgusting darknet market admin that I've seen in the context of darknet market, drug admins. I look forward to doing a more in-depth video later on about his specific screw-ups in operational security, but we need to wait until more documents are actually come out and we can find more information out about it. But for now, I just wanted to get a quick video out about his arrest and what he might be facing. And, a warning to other darknet market admins, this should definitely echo in the ears of some of the other darknet market administrators that are out there, showing that, doing an exit scam or trying to extort customers and vendors alike will cause you enemies on on both sides of that legal fence. And it's really interesting to see, like, how this kid is, this 23-year-old Asian kid is going to do inside of a maximum security penitentiary filled with some of the most ruthless and violent and dangerous individuals in the world. And it's definitely unfortunate that, he's completely evaporated any semblance of empathy that he could possibly get due to him stabbing everyone in the back off of whom he made money to begin with. So I'll definitely be back with an update or two on the fallout when they start really disclosing stuff in this kid's docket sheet. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that despite all this craziness, we're still seeing Incognito Market up, which is really kind of weird. It makes me think maybe it's been seized, and if so, how long has it been seized for? What do they know? We don't actually know. So it'll be interesting to see that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this craziness. What do you think he's going to get as a sentence? How do you think things are going to go for him in feds, especially in a maximum security penitentiary? Especially being a young kid who, obviously isn't, he's, I think his lack of English is all these kind of things, him screwing over and trying to extort some super dangerous people, are going to lead to a really rough time for him in the long run. But I could be wrong. They could put him in a place where he doesn't have to worry about anything. But we'll see. Only time will tell. But I'll be there, and we'll talk about it then whenever we see any developments. Thank you for watching to the end of the video. I appreciate you. Please like and subscribe if you like this content, and I will see you in the next video.